Bitcoin's security and decentralization are unmatched, but its scalability has always been a challenge. Today's guest is solving that. Sidhu is the core developer of Syscoin, a platform that's been building for over a decade, aiming to scale Bitcoin for the future of Web3. Welcome to Token for Your Thoughts.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to you about everything that's happening at Syscoin. But first, let's hear a bit about you. Have you always been into tech, or did you have a completely different plan before discovering blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, always sort of been in tech, on the software side, and then got involved with Bitcoin fairly early on. The core was sort of on its own track, and then I thought there needs to be discovery of other sort of ancillary ways to connect Bitcoin into, other sorts of services like escrow services or, smart contracts, and we created a whole bunch of sort of hardened smart contracts built on the blockchain early on, about 10 years ago. We had escrow service, we had a marketplace. Actually, the first version of Bitcoin had a decentralized marketplace built in. I don't know if you know that, but it was
I
taken
know.
out early on. It was like 0.3 or something like that. And we followed through with some of those ideas, and we thought, okay, if you're gonna do commerce, you want to do it in a way that removes the middleman. Who knows where that goes, what the implications are, but let's build that. So we had an identity system and an e-commerce sort of escrow system, a decentralized marketplace, and what I guess today are called NFTs, or certificates, were on chain. And yeah, so we realized that a lot of these things don't scale by putting them on chain using the data of the blockchain, which is fairly scarce. For 10 years, we've been evolving, trying to see what belongs there, what doesn't belong there. How do you solve the trilemma maximally to bring about the scale without affecting the security, right? Ultimately,
Hmm.
you're maximalists of the security model of something like Bitcoin, trying to keep, the decentralized aspect there 100% while still trying to scale to the average person. And if you without making those trade-offs, it's a really hard problem to get there, maybe impossible. So our attempts were, can we, within the realm of possibility, can we, get these things into blockchains without affecting the trade-offs that we're talking about. So that's been a journey, and yeah, we're happy that it's a funny thing. We've evolved sort of organically, but we never sort of took many steps back. We've been removing services and evolving naturally, saying, okay, well, we need roll-ups, or we need data availability, or we need ZK, but we never looked back and said, oh, we hit a dead end.
Hmm.
The project needs to go a vastly different direction, because at that point you're at you're at the end of that project life, and probably you start
Hmm.
a new project, right? And it's been funny that we've been evolving naturally to this point, and we still believe that what we have here is an ideal solution. If I was to start from scratch, I would still build it exactly the same way that it got built. So that's a really interesting thing. I've never been in a different position, so I can't say I would have done it differently, but
Hmm.
it's pretty cool to see that. Yeah, I'm proud of the team that what we built now is still relevant after 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have been around for a long time. You're basically like crypto dinosaurs. And I was going to ask you about that because that is a long time. And I was curious to know about how things have evolved in terms of, your overlying mission. But as you say, it's evolved in a natural and positive way, enabling you to, I guess, just keep improving and offer
Right.
new different solutions.
In terms of the vision, it hasn't changed, right? The vision has always been to create the decentralized technologies that will help scale and create a flexible platform to do that, and trying to tie into Bitcoin with the security model. And that vision was set 10 years ago, and it's still relevant. It's just, how do you scale? How do you create,
Hmm.
a maximally decentralized scalable solution, like I guess a supercomputer that's running in the cloud, that's redundant, right? You don't have to trust if the computer is running properly. You know it's running properly because every other person is checking that. That's the essence of a blockchain. So that vision hasn't changed. That's cool to see. When you fork your vision, that's when you create different products and different solutions. And
Hmm.
we haven't done that. We still have been following that same trajectory.
Yeah, that's incredible. And what initially first drew you to crypto or to Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, there's different, I guess different people look at it differently, but a lot of people came from the financial side and tried to take advantage of the price and buying high, or buying low, selling high, or making money, um, trying to accumulate more dollars or more satoshis in the event that it's going to get adopted. Other people came from the aspect of it's a cool technology, just want to build and want to be involved in something that it's going to be more and more relevant in the future. And then other people from philosophical perspective came from, oh, I think the monetary system needs a reset or is going to reset in our lifetime. So there's a higher chance of something like this taking hold. And
Hmm.
I guess those two aspects of it's a cool way to solve a problem, the BFT problem, where you don't typically in a database you're not able to solve it, but with blockchain you're able to solve this effectively in a good way. Being able to distribute that database across many people and have everyone trust that the system is safe. That's it was like one of those open math problems that weren't solved for centuries, right? And it's not completely solved, but it's made as a production ready solution for people to use. And the philosophical side of realizing all the problems of the world that are creeping up, and at that point, 2006, 7, 8, there was, the financial crash and all of the stuff that happened in the bond markets, and people were scared that this was the beginning of a total reset. And
Hmm.
when that reset happens, what is the monetary base that you use at that point? Do you make another dollar? Do you make a Mero, or do you make like a global currency? And yeah, the thought process is maybe Bitcoin is the answer to that sort of thing. At least it has a say in that 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 story or that future. And so those are the two aspects I was more drawn into. Of course, when you first think about Bitcoin, you have to think about them. If you're going to create a monetary system, you have to think about inflation and deflation and how gold works or how US dollar works. And the tough part was, getting over the hump of realizing that, deflationary currencies can work, just like you buy your TV and you know that you're going to buy that TV, even though it's going to get, cheaper and cheaper every year. But
Hmm.
uh, those was sort of things early on that people had to grapple with, and we had to grapple with as well. And how is it going to work when it gets adopted? And we're seeing that sort of thing really, really play out now, and that
Hmm.
benefits of limited supply and all that stuff.
What has it been like building in the space for this amount of time? Obviously, seeing the multiple market cycles. I mean, how do you persevere during, the bear markets? What would you say to people newer in the space who are experiencing the ups and downs?
There's definitely a recipe for builders, and I would say don't get too high and don't get too low, right?
Okay.
Keep yourself healthy, eat healthy, get some sleep, exercise. If you have a family, they keep you in check. Just try not to go out of your little ball. And for us, first maybe 6, 7 years, I didn't even go to many events, didn't attend outside of consensus, maybe in New York for the first few years. And going out to party and schmooze around with people and say like, this is what we're building. It takes a toll over the years, and not many
Hmm.
people can keep going and keep themselves in check. So um, a lot of it is mental health and physical health, and then not allowing yourself to get sort of too caught up in the FOMO, or when it's too down, you have to have a plan for when things are down. What are you going to do? And that's when most of the work gets done usually, because you can't stop looking at the charts when things are going up, and it does affect the work. And when it goes down, you just bury your head and just forget things and just build. So
Hmm.
yeah, that recipe's been working over, I think, 4 or 5 cycles now, and, it reinforces that it's been working, so we're just gonna keep doing that, and I think it's a lot of the projects are going to have to grapple with these things to come
Hmm.
up with these recipes. It's not like public markets. It's not like a corp, right? There's revenue required in those, otherwise you die. And these that you could have blockchains that don't have any revenue, but they're carrying tens of millions, billions of market cap, and there's
Hmm.
no money being made. Like it's just token price is freely trading against no revenue base, and you can get carried away quickly. Realize that you have maybe there is value there when there really isn't. Just speculation there would be value. So, yeah, it's a different world, different beast for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting and really good advice to hear your perspective, given that you've been in the space for so long. So let's get into Syscoin then. How would you explain it for someone new, a top line level?
Yeah, I think it's I guess what you have with Ethereum and the modular aspect of creating if you think of a computer, you have computer locally on your desk where you have the CPU and disk and RAM all sitting in one box. But if you separate those things and say let's run that computer on the cloud and make it distributed so it's I can trust every action that's coming out of that. If it's a financial transaction, I can trust that it's safe, and if I send some money or make a financial transaction, it's going to settle. You have to sort of have redundancy there, and you're basically creating a logical cloud world computer, right? And that's why Ethereum was labeled as the world's supercomputer. That was the vision statement for it when Ethereum 1 came out, right? Um,
Hmm.
and then the missing aspect there was for us was the security model, tying it back to the Bitcoin miners itself. And so the thought process is you have the ability not just to vault, not just store value, deflation, or only money that Bitcoin is, but extending that into the world of being able to do logical computing or any type of computing with your finance. So who knows what happens? I mean, other than creating JPEGs and NFTs and meme coins, there's a whole world out there of when you disintermediate the middle guy and he's not taking a cut and he's not holding custody of your funds that you can run away with. It opens up a lot of cool things to be able to program what those rules should be between people or things. And I don't think we barely touched the iceberg on, I think, what the tip of the iceberg of what the ramifications are globally once you create the scalable, secure platforms. Even I think a couple of days ago, like Cardano Charles was saying, once, he's always saying, once I create this scalable platform, my next job is to really see how it fits within this future in this world. And I think many of the platforms are still not stable, production ready, scalable, secure solutions. But once and I think we're getting close. And once they are, when they're easy to use, you'll see the crazy use cases coming that we would never have predicted.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's still a lot to come on that front for sure. And so one of the things that you are building are edge chains. Can you talk us through that and what problem they solve?
Yeah, so the way we thought about solving was to create modularity, right? Like you can't really put everything in one place and expect all the computing, all the RAM, all the storage happening at one spot. You have to separate everything, right? And say, okay, well, the computing could happen in one place, and then you store somewhere else, and you use the memory somewhere else, and users are interacting with the system in a scalable way at a really cheap cost basis, maybe even free if you can get it there.
Hmm.
Um, the computing is the main bottleneck, or was the main bottleneck. And if you separate the ability to do your smart contract computing, what we're thinking is like a ZK solutions out there now are getting to a point where you could run any sort of computing and make it deterministic. So you know that it is exactly as you expect it to do. Like if I'm sending some money or I'm making a transaction, it has to be correct. But you use the blockchain as sort of this data layer where you can store the results of those computations. For example, if I send you, Lindsay, some money, the our balances are shifting and those balances are recorded on the blockchain. But the computing could really happen outside. Traditionally, it was thought that the computing needed to be on the blockchain, right? Because every node needs to recompute and come up with the same state. Now,
Hmm.
realization is you can offload all that computing to really just a computer in the cloud, but it has to run correctly. The need for the blockchain is basically just storing the results so that everyone can agree that this is a state and I should be able to exit that system or enter that system. And that's the modular blockchain thesis, right? And ZK-Sys and edge chains are just basically a layer on top of this base layer that's tied to Bitcoin for the data for all the computations, all of the smart contract executions, the Turing complete computing happening runs in ZK, and each edge chain could be basically its own vertical economy, vertical ecosystem running its own chain, and
Hmm.
each one has a ZK sort of system or hierarchical solution where you have provers proving each chain, right? And then at the end, they're all combined, and there's one proof that goes into the base, and that creates an economy of scale because for the first time, you can have local economies or local ecosystems all computing away and scaling as fast as they could, and then in the end, you recursively just combine them really cheaply and have one proof representing a tree-like structure of chains. And why hasn't that really been done up to this point? Well, it is sort of being done, but the problems you get when you start to separate the computing from the data are you don't have one spot anymore. You have multiple sort of hubs. And when you have multiple hubs, like you have Arbitrum and ZK-Sync and Polygon, uh,
Hmm.
you have financial centers, and each financial center has its own liquidity, its own users, and you need to somehow combine those. And I know, Sandeep and what Alex doing over Matter Labs, they're basically trying to figure out how do you combine those edge chains or those app chains into one financial center so that
Hmm.
everyone shares liquidity and it feels like what Solana's trying to do, everything in one spot, right? But you're not putting everything in one chain. You're just putting the proofs at the end in one chain. So that was
Right.
edge chain concept is being able to separate in a tree-like structure to allow them to horizontally and vertically scale using the blockchain as a data layer and then at the same time trying to create a holistic financial center so the users and liquidity could be shared. And that's starting to become possible with ZK Tech now.
Amazing. And ZK-Sys is your first edge chain. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we called like the base of this system Bitcoin Plus, and ZK-Sys is like the first example or showcase. We had a chain called Rolex. It's the symbol right there. Rolex was an optimistic rollup, and we're migrating that to ZK to take advantage of this of the tech, right? So we'll not only have these edge chains. The first one, ZK-Sys, with its own ecosystem. We'll have decentralized sequencing, so it's just going to have the same level of security as the base, because the validators of Syscoin will be able to create the blocks of these edge chains, and then you'll have the DA, of course, at the base happening. It's basically scaling up the data, and that's all tied to Bitcoin. That's all tied to the Bitcoin miners they're mining. There's other sort of important aspects that are more technical, like finality and tying proofs back to Bitcoin, so you could do bridging, and those are different aspects depending on where we want to go. But I think for the readers, just basically just a combination of Bitcoin and Ethereum done right, we think, in one spot that offers, very secure, very decentralized ability for computing to happen. We don't want to dictate what kind of computing could happen. It's really that's up to the market, but what we're trying to do is create that infrastructure so that the market could take this and say, I could depend on it. It's production ready. It won't break. There won't be black swan attacks. Uh, if there are, then there's much bigger problems with everyone else. We want to be the last one sort of standing in that situation. And that's always been our model is, if Bitcoin is a super secure system and it's got the most people or the mining power behind it, it's probably got the most governments and money that if something happens, it's not going to go away. And we tie that security model to this computing platform, basically, that lets you do more than just hold coins.
Mhm. Amazing. And you also have an AI component to this with the Sentry nodes. What do they do?
The Sentry nodes are just they're like think of them as just they're running full nodes.
Mhm.
They're just running a copy of the blockchain and making sure that all the transactions and the blocks are going through. But what we're doing in this next version of Syscoin is the ability for them to start to be registered in this computing platform in a decentralized way. Like I'm not sure if you know how Ethereum works, but Ethereum has two chains. They have the beacon chain, and then they have the execution layer. And the beacon chain is basically responsible for creating finality and creating the next block and all this sort of stuff. And then the computing layer execution layer is basically just making sure that all the consistency is there when you run a smart contract. In a similar way, we have it's not really a beacon chain, but it's like a Bitcoin tied side chain that is like the consensus layer. It has the data availability, and then we have an execution layer running the smart contract. And those two are sort of tied together. Once you register, the validators are running on the consensus layer. So next to Bitcoin, those validators are responsible for finality, just like Ethereum is doing. And once the finality is achieved, the blockchain cannot roll back. It's set in stone. So that has really good properties if you can get finality because you could remove things from the blockchain like data. You can create data availability and scale up your blockchain once you have finality.
Mhm.
Once these validators are registered in the execution layer, and you could use them for all sorts of cool things like in smart contracts. And AI obviously is one of those things that we think is it's going to be the main driver we think of computing going forward. Like AI agents will be doing all the work for you, doing the transactions for you. One of the things, and when you're running these, you need to make sure that any services or any secure infrastructure you make, you want to try to tie it back to the base layer to make sure the alignment is there. For example, I spoke about decentralized sequencing, right? A big pro When you start to break up the blockchain, the CPU and disk are separate, the RAM is separate, and you have all sorts of issues with alignment. Like the guys that are storing on the disk, they want to be paid more than the guys that are being paid for computing. And the computing guys like, no, I don't, I can use any disk. I don't need to use your disk. But you need to tie that together, and that's what sequencing or decentralizing the sequencing is all about. And
Mhm.
connecting those pieces creates a holistic ecosystem back to the modular thesis. It creates a holistic sort of everyone is pulling in the same direction, rowing the boat, and they want to make sure that you don't have these separate economies and markets that are fighting together. These validators would be sort of not only doing decentralized sequencing, but also running these core infrastructure mechanisms like AI services that will be basically creating consensus for agents. Like once you have a monetary system, you can have Bitcoin in there or Syscoin as a base collateral. You can
Mhm.
start to do things like I have an AI DAO, for example, or I will have agents that will check to see if there's a fork happening in the chain and alert you and stop your transaction from going through. Or I'll have agents checking for an insurance policy that you've purchased to know because you are Walmart, you're accepting money in real time, the money's not going to settle right away. Just like on Visa, it doesn't settle right away, but you'll have assurance through AI agents that nothing's wrong going in the chain. And if there is something that happens wrong, you are covered. The money that you're collecting from clients and customers
Mhm.
is going to get covered because from your perspective, you purchase a policy. So having on-chain AI services that will be able to secure themselves, have smart contracts behind them, have policies and plans and make sure it has visibility is one thing. And then the financial aspect of we think in the future AI is going to be IQ of AI is rising exponentially. At some point, it's going to have more information. It already has more information, but it's going to have more capacity, better decision making. It'll be able to analyze the market better. It'll be able to make better decisions of trading and allocation of funds, right? So for like
Hmm.
a DAO, once you have these DAOs, I fully expect that these these funds will make more money than any human could, even with
Hmm.
inside information. The problem is it holding these funds in an autonomous way. If you give power back to people, it's going to get corrupt. So if you give full power to an AI or AI agents, it can also be manipulated. So how do you solve that so it can't be manipulated and it can keep continuing to earn more and more money and fostering trust of users while it doesn't get hacked from users saying, "Hey, give me your money or give me your private key." So yeah, AI services or consensus of agents and services on top is it's sort of it's not really a niche vertical. I think it's so important because this is a
Hmm.
it, the connection between AI and blockchain is very fuzzy. I think this is a very strong connection to make sure that things, finance could be done with agents in a safe way. So these Sentry nodes are responsible for being a part of that aligned strategy to have everyone, thinking of how to do AI in the best way while being secured by those validators running on the base that are also secured by the Bitcoin miners that are mining Bitcoin.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting hearing how AI can help reinforce that. And it's an area that is changing so much of, our world in so many different ways. And so it's interesting seeing how it's being used in blockchain too. Are there any other, you mentioned quite a few like instances there with insurance, and are there any kind of, I don't know, wild or crazy like use cases or scenarios that you've come across of like how AI can be used in this sense?
I think in general, you use blockchain and you think of Web3 as a concept now, almost like it's like a component of a modular blockchain. Web3 is basically you doing transactions on the blockchain. Um,
Hmm.
think of Web3 as an incentive vehicle for uh, inf information, like if when you're dealing with people that want to get involved and work on things, like we are in an economy where we want to code together and we want to make a product, right?
Hmm.
Um, Web3 is like an incentive vehicle that will allow people to get together, not only just to pay each other, or to do some lending, borrowing on the blockchain, but also a vehicle for people to want to get together and to do development. And one of the products, like the home of this ecosystem, was a social app we're making called SuperDApp. And the concept there is people can join together and invest in each other at the same time. People are making money, but they're in this together. They're using AI tools to collaborate. Um, I guess if you think of Telegram and Twitter, combine them, you have information theory of like I see the news and I have people collaborating what's happening in the world, and you have Telegram where you have a collaborative tool where people can join groups and they can work together, right? So
Hmm.
information plus collaboration, I think Web3 makes that glue piece come together. People will not only be able to get the latest information from whoever they're following or whatever groups they're in, but also collaborate to create uh more innovation, right? To be able to use these
Hmm.
tools to code or to do anything. By the end of this year, 80% of the code is going to be through agents, and that's going to have huge effects. Now,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
need to have the tools so that people, it's not just one person in India that's coding things,
Hmm.
billion-dollar companies. It's got to be people together or agents together, working together, and they're incentivized to work together. So um, today, I think OpenAI announced that they're doing a social app as well. I think they all realize it that there's asymmetry of information, then there's agents working together, and you need to
Hmm.
tie those things together. The next step that they'll realize, both I think OpenAI and Twitter will realize, is Web3 is an incentive vehicle to pull people in because no one's going to do it unless they're going to be making money. Either you're
Hmm.
a KOL that's tweeting out, but that's a dying model, just tweeting out information and getting money from other people from doing that, or you're providing some value and making people come together, and people are creating value together and making money and spreading that out socially. So yeah,
Hmm.
we think it's the logical next step, social markets, social aspects, social apps, or super apps, and Web3. And AI is the vehicle to make sure all the collaboration, innovation, and information processing could happen for you. Because it doesn't need to happen on the chain.
Hmm.
These AI agents don't need to be running on the chain, but they're using the blockchain for its right purpose, for its investments or for
Hmm.
incentives or to make sure that there's no middleman, so it's holding custody, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. It's sort of like this perfect trifecta of information, collaboration, and then Web3 getting involved. As you said, that will just accelerate everything from development and innovation projects. That will be really interesting to see that all come together and the impact that will have.
For sure. Yeah.
So you have also are also developing a bridge, Robin Bridge, which enables Bitcoin interoperability. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah. So a lot of the OGs of Bitcoin have been trying to create secure vaults to be able to put Bitcoin into the use on external systems, right? And the problem when you do that is you run into, okay, if I move my Bitcoin over from Bitcoin into a side chain, now that Bitcoin is stored on Bitcoin in sort of a lockbox, right? In order to move that Bitcoin out, I just need to prove that my Bitcoin has moved back from the side chain back to Bitcoin, right? And the problems are obvious that if you defeat the side chain, if you take over the side chain, like if there's $1 billion in this lockbox and it costs you 10 million to take over the side chain for 10 minutes, and someone does that, and you only need to do it for 10 minutes, then you can take the $1 billion of Bitcoin, right? And that is always going to happen. And that's what's stopping people from using these systems.
Hmm.
So what a lot of people thought were when Robin Linus did BitVM, a lot of people thought, okay, we could build sort of a external system right on Bitcoin. You store, remember I said you separate the computing and the data. Well,
Hmm.
why don't we combine the data and the computing, sort of the computing settles all its data in Bitcoin itself, using Bitcoin as a data layer. You're running computing off chain using ZK, but the lockbox is stored on Bitcoin. You essentially start to get more than just Bitcoin storage. You get Bitcoin computing. So you can put your Bitcoin, move it into a side, and start to do more, right? So that a lot of teams are doing that, right? And that seems to be okay. But using Bitcoin as a data layer is not efficient as well. And also, you probably want an economic unit that's meant for utility of that platform, like an economic unit that doesn't deflate only, that makes it cheap or maybe super cheap to do transactions, that isn't going to deflate to zero and make it super costly in 10 years, right? And these are aspects of side chains that can only be applied. Like when you're doing a side chain, you have a new token, it's minted, and then you do a side chain bridge. The other aspect is scale. Like when you have limited block space on Bitcoin, if you start
Hmm.
to throw a lot of data on, even if it's like a lot of transactions and you're storing our account states, it gets very expensive because the blocks will get full and regular people can't transact on Bitcoin because all this other data is being stored. And all the nodes have to store this data forever, so it gets really expensive for everybody. And our thought process is that's great, but why don't we, for side chains, can we solve this problem? Can we make it so that you take this new technology that BitVM came with, and we're
Hmm.
able to evolve naturally to think about, can we connect this to Syscoin as a side chain and make it as secure as the system that's being used right on Bitcoin itself? But now it's super scalable as well. And so that was our research, is to try to maximize the security, to try to make at least the least amount of trust assumptions by introducing a sidechain approach. So that white paper is ready. We'll put that out soon, and that allows us to basically say that we are able to get equivalent or better security of using, a system of BitVM right on Bitcoin itself, but
Hmm.
by using a separate sidechain. Now you have complete flexibility and scalability. You have a separate data layer. You have our own DA layer that deletes data after 6 hours, so it's super efficient. And then you have ZK-Sys and these sort of things that will create the computing to make it scale. Once Bitcoin's in that economy, it should be the base collateral for the whole thing. Like all the lending, borrowing, people will be, lending it out. It's gonna have more premium compared to other Bitcoin assets because it's the most secure one for any other side chain. So we'll likely be able to connect this Bitcoin to all the other EVM chains like Ethereum and all the other chains. It'll be considered less risky because
Hmm.
self has less trust assumptions. So that's our goal, is to bring it into Sys and then from there use it in our economy, but also extend that economy to other chains and other ecosystems as well. How that's done, is a little bit technical, but maybe I can say that there is basically, with this next Syscoin release that we just released, we inject the Syscoin blockchain data, like just the hash, uh,
Hmm.
not the current hash, but maybe like 10 blocks back. We inject that into Bitcoin itself, and then we check that it's injected in Bitcoin. And because you're able to inject the block state into Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners are doing this. Um, when we create that bridge, we are in Bitcoin, we are watching to make sure that all of the blocks have been reported in Bitcoin and are part of the real Syscoin chain. So because the bridge is watching for the Bitcoin blocks, we're able to cross-reference the Syscoin blocks with the Bitcoin blocks. And if there's any anomalies, we basically you stop the bridge becomes invalid for that transaction. So anyone trying to do anything funny, they'll just lose money and you get full security. So it's a unique take to try to get higher security for a bridge and then connect that to the side chain.
Nice. Awesome. That sounds very appealing. Obviously, security is one of the main priorities people look for in a bridge or when transferring any asset. And that sounds like a really innovative, smart solution to that. So, who are your target users right now, and how are people using Syscoin? Where are they getting the most value?
I think with ZK-Sys, it starts to become really easy for retailers, but I think most of the users right now are probably crypto native. But
Hmm.
fairly soon, you're going to have the ability to, use your biometrics to be able to create an account and have
Ah,
your email basically have a 2FA, a real 2FA, not just like your private key sent around an email, but your email address. When you make an email, it's actually doing a signature. Um, that signature could be used to access your crypto account. Uh, that's called
oh, interesting.
ZK email. It's all ZK technology, right?
Hmm.
And the trick is that the blockchain needs to understand the cryptographic curves that are implemented in the email systems and your phone for biometrics or your face. These are standard NIST-based curves that are applied through Microsoft and Android, Samsung. All these, they're all basically combining the same curve and standardizing around it. But this curve is not available to Ethereum and these EVM blockchains because they were very expensive and no one thought of to do it. But the ZK-Sys has these curves implemented so that you can check them in a really cheap way to be able to basically do a transaction to authenticate or do a check against the blockchain that your biometric is validated or your email is validated, combined with account abstraction, which is the concept that your blockchain account is not just one phrase or one seed phrase. It's basically separate accounts. Like you have your
Hmm.
bank account, you have your sub accounts. Uh,
Hmm.
you might have your email stuff linked to a everyday account, and then you have your checking or savings sort of separate, and that requires your full private key, like
Okay.
quantum resistant and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how we start combining the ability to sign with the ability to separate these accounts, and you'll get real usability for everyday people.
Mhm. Yeah, just saying the word email, it's like, oh, okay, that's that's something most people understand rather than seed phrase and, all the other more technical aspects of the ecosystem. So yeah,
Well,
it's
email
definitely.
was the first. it's actually the biggest well-known distributed digital identity system in the world, right? Because
Hmm.
it's legally enforceable as well. In the court system, you could use email for forensic or any evidence or whatever. So it's recognized. The signatures actually recognized as a tamper-proof mechanism to provide data to the court. So it's actually worldwide. It's the only digital system that's distributed. Everyone is standardized. So yeah, just tie that in. I mean, there's a little bit of trust on the email services like Google or Gmail because
Hmm.
they have the keys to be able to have you sign. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, there's two or three people. But again, it's not for for all of your money. You're only storing
Hmm.
it for your everyday use. And if that goes down, sure, like I'm not sure if Google would take that money or what would happen, but I think that it's a trade-off and you're trying to create that convenience layer, just like your banking and your banking system, the bank is telling you this is how much money you own and they could pull it at any time.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, what would you say is a favorite moment so far from your time from Syscoin? You guys are doing a lot of different things. Like you said, you've evolved a lot over the years. Have there been any standout moments or highlights for you?
Yeah, I think the time we realized let's see, there was like transitions. So Sys, we realized, okay, we can't put everything on the blockchain. It won't scale this way.
Hmm.
Realize, okay, we clean everything up. That was a moment of revelation. And then the next one was, oh, ZK is coming. Likely AI is coming in our lifetime. We probably should think about very use cases where there's a lot of people, a lot of devices connecting to these blockchains. And that was modularity, right? Breaking the blockchain up into components and using the data, using a data availability layer with ZK. And then now, the third major sort of realization was now we can complete the picture by tying it all back to Bitcoin and also having uh, basically the ZK systems are ready to go and it's going to be able to be retail friendly and having the AI stuff all play within it basically as a tool for people to use as a front end. All of that is it's getting bigger and bigger. Like these breakthroughs and these understandings are have bigger and bigger ramifications. But I think that this recent one is really cool and just and it's working. Like we upgraded the miners upgraded and everything seems to be working. The next step for us is just to make that the bridge code and test it out. So there's like three big sort of fundamental pivots that we realized. We didn't pivot the technology too much. We just pivoted, our focus. Okay, we need to build for modularity. We need to build for AI plus DA
Yeah.
plus ZK and all that.
Nice. What a great journey. And yeah, exciting times for where you are at now with this new release. And so what's ahead? What are you guys working towards for 2025?
Yeah, I think once Sys 5 is stable, we basically start working on the bridge and we work getting ZK-Sys out there because it still hasn't been released to mainnet. We
Hmm.
basically start getting out there, put the people on there and start building products on top. Hackathons and the other cool thing is we created a governance system that allows a community to vote in funds for what they think is useful. And we think
Awesome.
I think every blockchain is going to need to do something like that. It's not
Hmm.
meant to say like we need a huge fund war chest or anything. It's meant for like we need public goods. Like who's going to run the RPC services? Who's going to run the block explorers? Who's going to pay
Right.
for a dev team to manage the code? Who's going to, maybe who's going to send the team to an event to promote Syscoin for that specific event, high value event? Like the Dogecoin had a NASCAR early days. So you could use these systems if people aren't willing to pay out of their pocket, you use your monetary base as a voting mechanism to vote
Hmm.
in funds, and that should be able to go up and down. So if people believe that it's not being used efficiently, they should be able to say, no, let's remove all the proposals, let's vote it all the way down so there's no inflation. And that's totally possible too. So yeah, we think many or if not all of the later blockchains will be following that model as well, realizing that at some point through multiple bears, you're going to have no treasury. So, you have to the funds where they're going to come from. Bitcoin's story is very different. Bitcoin is just a store of value. If you're going to do more, you're going to run services that cost real money, and users are going to depend on them. You might need a more formal governance system that can help make that happen. And it's more of a bootstrap. So there's other ways to do public funding as well, using AI tools and stuff as well. So once you get going, and I think the bootstrap phase is over, then basically you transition to this next phase where people are creating their own products and funding them, and potentially using AI tools to figure out which developers to fund, and keep building on
Yeah.
that blockchain.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot, but is there anything that we didn't get to that you would like to talk
No, I
about before
think
we wrap?
they're really great questions. I think we covered most of it. I'm not sure if you have any other questions specifically, but I think overall, just yeah, it's a really exciting time. It's our third big breakthrough moment, I think. So exciting to be part of this and keep going. It's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. It's been really interesting to hear about your journey, about Syscoins, and really appreciate you taking us through everything that you're building. There's a lot of different components offering some really unique solutions that's going to improve the Bitcoin ecosystem for sure. And it's been really interesting hearing about your journey in the space as well, because there aren't a lot of projects that have been around for as long as you guys. So appreciate you sharing, your experiences and, advice with us. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Jag. It's been really great chatting with you.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. It was great to chat, and looking forward to our next chat.
Absolutely. And I'll make sure to drop all the links to your website and your socials in the show notes as well for anyone who wants to follow along or find out more. All right. So that's it for today's episode of Token for Your Thoughts. Be sure to follow and subscribe for more conversations with people building the future of crypto and Web3. We'll see you on the next episode.